the parties that we...
You were a long way from 100 miles
from Fort Francis and at least 100 miles to Port Arthur, so we couldn't get no Canadian liquor, and we used to buy this American moonshine, 10-gallon barrel for $30. And each valley, and Det Barn, who was the kind of a head ranger, he was a desperate boozer, and a fellow by the name of Quinn. We had our own, each guy had his own barrel in his own corner in the shack there, cabin 16. And then Fence did, and many of the other guides and his wife and them, they'd come over, and we'd hoop her up for 2 or 3 days and nights. And it was Ted Det Barn's job. He was a license issuer at cabin 16. And he'd be so drunk, laying there, he wouldn't get out of bed to pour it. He had a rubber hose, and he had the barrel sitting on a stool, and he'd siphon it. He'd lay in bed, great big Dutchman he was, and he'd siphon it. But when he heard a boat coming, he'd get up to meet the boat, and him drunk, and sometimes he had a beard like porcupine quills, you know. He'd hear the boat, and he had an old screen door in that old shack there. That's before the new cabin was built down there. And he couldn't judge himself, so he'd start to open the door, and you go head first right out in front there, you know, and there was the tours. But the most of them knew them, because in those days, the most of the tours was repeaters, you know, that came back year after year, and some of them would bring him a bottle. I'll tell you, it was quite a setup. And one time we were away, and he got drunk, and he had about $1,500 or better, and he was cagey enough, because we didn't have any safe to keep money in. He took the money out in the woods on the island there and hid it under a rock, but he forgot where it was, you know. And he got it, oh boy, we hunted for days. And he figured maybe we came back and stole it, or somebody came in and stole it, which was possible, you know. We didn't take it, but we had to go to Ely to cover up. And we knew the bank manager real well, First National Bank of Ely, Louis White. And we told Louis White our trouble. And we had to have that money on a certain day. We had to send postal money orders from Ely to Jameson at French Lake. And we told him what happened, and he says, well, if you can't find it by that date, he says, we'll come across with the money for us. And we went back, we looked again, and we didn't find it, but you know, old Ted, he was sleeping one night, and he dreamt where he left the money, and he went, and there it was. You talk about a mix-up, you know. But I used to get drunk once in a while overnight, but then that was all. But he'd stay drunk all summer, this great big Dutchman, you know.
And you say that Jameson would come down via Ely.
Oh yes, they'd go to Fort Francis and go across and take the train up to Ely.
And the outfitters or the lodges would grab...
They'd always keep us informed because they'd hold them over a day in Ely, you know. And they had lots of launches, you know. They'd run up back and forth, and they'd keep us posted when he was coming. We had to be in shape in those days, so, you know, that day.
And you had your booze.
Oh, you betcha. We used to have an off time with those old Dutchmen. To get them sobered up and clean them up a little bit, you know what I mean? Oh, no.
But Ted, or at least Walt Hearn wasn't like that.
Oh, no, he drank a little bit. Hearn had a lot of money. Very fine man, very refined. He'd buy a drink, or if he saw you in Ely or something, he'd buy you a meal or something, but that was it. He saved his money. And when he left the park, he had about $30,000, went back to England. After he was over here in North America probably for 40 years, you know what I mean. Yeah. Hearn was a fine man.
Okay.
When you were on Basswood Lake, did you ever hear that the first cabin built by Bill Darby was on Customs Island rather than Cabin 16 Island?
Well, pardon me, Customs cabin was built after I left there. To the best of my knowledge, it was built for the old cabin, where Cabin 16 is today. And Bill Darby and his partner, the government wouldn't give them train fare. They hauled a roll of tar paper up on a toboggan from Rainy Lake, Namakan Lake, and up through to Basswood Lake to build the first shack there. Darby told me afterwards that if he had to use his head, he would he should, which they should have done was to pay their own fare and they could have bought a roll of tar paper at Ely, which was only 17 miles away from the border. You get me? They went through a lot of hardships. Some no.
They brought the tar paper from Fort Francis.
Yes, on a toboggan.
Through Crane Lake.
Up through Rainy Lake, Namakan Lake, and up Basswood River and up to Basswood there.
You were telling me about this Jesuit priest,
Mm-hmm.
Father Boo,
Mm-hmm.
that was mentioned in the book.
Yes.
You met him?
No, he was gone. He was dead. But I heard people in the early days around Ely talking about him. You know what I mean? And it was mentioned in this a book of Ely. There's a book put out now from Ely, the history of northern Minnesota. I don't know whether you got a hold of that one or
I'm
not.
not sure. We do have one I haven't had a chance to read yet.
It's quite possible. It shows a picture, but regarding it was regarding the lumber days, some of the old timers, but was just a picture of Father Boo, and there was very little said about him, one way or the other. But the old timers that I knew in Ely, that he was a Jesuit, that he traveled, a missionary priest among the Indians, and with the whites too.
On Basswood Lake, there were trading posts long ago.
Hudson Bay apparently too had, I don't know, 100, 200 years ago, they had a trading post there, according to what I've been told. Some claims it was on, Leo Chosa told me it was on Ottawa Island, which is a big island right close to Cabin 16. When I was down there, I looked for it, but I couldn't find nothing. Only I found some old, I think it was either old trappers' foundations, or in the early days the Indians didn't build many cabins, mostly wigwams. But the French, there were a lot of Frenchmen that came up to St. Lawrence that trapped all through here, right through to the Hudson Bay. There's where some of these Indians got their names, like Labatt and many others, Chosas, and many, but I think they were probably the first so-called whites.
Did you meet any people working with the boundary survey?
Not too much. There was some international engineers that came through, but they stopped very briefly. They didn't do any work very much in my day down there.
Were there gatherings of Indians with ceremonies on Basswood?
Not too much. Once in a while, they would have a little powwow. There wasn't too many. The big powwows was either on Lake LaCroix or Net Lake, that's in Minnesota, or some of those places. There wasn't too much. The only Indians or breeds that was living on Basswood in my day was those Chosas. But down on Jackfish Bay, that's part of Basswood Lake on the U.S. side, there was quite a lot of Indians at one time, but they all disappeared. A lot of them buried there too. That was a kind of a headquarters for them when they were traveling from LaCroix and Tower, many other places into Whenton and Ely.
Before I forget, I wanted to ask you if anyone had ever told you how Quetico got its name.
It's a French, pardon me, to the best of my knowledge, it's a French name. It was a French, he works, Paul Pachot. Had you ever run into him? Paul Pachot did work for the Federal Forestry Association with a head office in Montreal, and he's a lecturer, and he used to travel along these lines here, showing wilderness pictures and things like that. And he was an educated man. The proper pronunciation for Quetico is Quitico-Lacote, means beyond the horizon. Maybe you know. Maybe you people understand French. I don't.
I've heard that
Yeah,
version.
yeah.
Have you ever heard, would it be the same reason for the name of the station, Quetico, on the railway?
I kind of, pardon me, I never heard of it, but to what I could gather, my own humble knowledge, I imagine that it was copied off of this Quitico-Lacote or whatever it's called. And see, the English spelling of Quetico is not the same as the French version.
Computer that. You were going on about the name of Quetico.
Oh, I was going to ask you, thinking of the railway, there's mention of a person called Planet Pete.
Planet Pete. I know of a place called Planet, but I never heard of.
You've never heard of a person
No,
called Planet
that
Pete?
is right.
Now, I just wanted to go through these names. You told me about Fred Atkins.
Uh-huh.
I had here that he was from Saskatchewan,
Uh-huh.
and he was hired on in 1925, and he ranged with Bob Wells.
Pardon me, he ranged with my brother Jack Wells first. And I was with him just temporary, on short trips and stuff. But he ranged one winter with my brother Jack, who's in Atikokan.
At that time, did they sleep out in tents in the winter?
No, they had shacks. Once in a while, you got after a poacher or somebody, you had to stay out overnight, you know, if you really want to get them or go after them pretty hard. But they had, they were awful crude shacks, but they were shelters. Pretty rough.
Now I have here in, well, that's Fred Atkins, moved from Quetico Station to Coween when the park was moved north as far as the railway. He retired in 1965 and he died about 1974.
Yes, that's right. That is right.
Did you ever know George Buckingham?
Real well. I don't know whether he's living or not, but he moved out to British Columbia. He was an old-time fire. See, in the early days, there were two different departments: the fire department and the ranger department. He was a fire ranger for many seasons in the summer, and then he was a park ranger later. And then he quit and went out to British Columbia.
Were you ever on the same?
Yeah, him and I patrolled the Shelley Lake area one spring. And then after the so-called the trapper season was over, he went back fire ranger. He worked for Bill Darby most of the time. He was the forestry fire chief for Rainy River District, Darby was.
And they called them Darby's Dirty Dozen? Did you ever hear that?
Paddy Ryan was next in command with Darby. Next.
What was George Buckingham like?
Oh, yeah, pardon me, that's not... I'll tell you, most of the rangers trapped, some for the government, some for themselves. I know an experience that Buckingham got very religious. No, that's nothing against that. I'm not against religion or anything else. But he trapped one spring with a guy, and he wouldn't trap. He had a big Bible with him. He read the Bible, and he cooked. He wouldn't have nothing to do with the beaver. But he went down to Campbell's with the rest of the rangers, and this other guy sold the beaver, about $1,400 with a beaver, and he took half the money. So he was just as guilty as the guy that trapped the beaver, you know. But he wouldn't trap them. But that was his type.
Someone said that he was quite an artist.
Yes,
Drew pictures.
yes, some. Yeah, I know a better. Did you ever run? You know him. I'm not switching from Buckingham.
Oh,
Bouchard. Or
Bouchard,
whatever.
I've
John
heard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, he Buckingham could draw a little bit.
Speaking of going to Campbell's, Mr. Handberg, I talked to Mr. and Mrs. Handberg
Oh, yes.
last summer. It's the only time I have.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking him about maple sugar,
Mm-hmm.
whether the Indians ever made maple sugar.
Uh-huh.
And he said he used to buy it and sell it.
Yes.
Did you?
We never. There wasn't too much maple in the Quetico, but the Indians in LaCroix did make some. Wherever they got it, it might have been around Namican or that area there. Some.
Was it hard? Quite
Oh yeah,
hard?
oh yeah. Just like I guess I came from a maple sugar country in New Brunswick, and there was like some of the they made it good too. It was just like pounds of butter, you know. They sold it by the pound.
Was it wrapped in birch bark?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Of course, that was a good selling card too, you know, in birch bark. You know what I mean?
To Americans.
Yes, that's right.
There might have been, like there are some maple on the reserve at Lac LaCroix, but you'd wonder if there was enough.
Yeah, there's the occasional maple in the Quetico laying in between Lake Louise and the Man Chain. There's a few in there, but not many.
Coffee?
No, thank you. Thank you for no. about you?
Buckingham was in charge at times of this provincial youth program. It's
If he
so-
was, pardon me, he was there a short time after I left there. It's possible. I'm not positive on that deal. But he was kind of Darby made him a kind of a deputy chief fire ranger. See, they had fire ranger stations, one at Sturgeon Narrows, as you probably know. I don't know whether that building is still standing or not. Fire ranger station there at Sturgeon Narrows. And they used to have a so-called deputy chief and 4 firefighters, tower man. George Walsh was a tower man there for many, many years, and he also was a park ranger at one time.
Tell me about Leo Chosa.
Leo, he was quite a man, Leo. A self-educated man. He tried everything to make a living. He was about a quarter Indian, and pretty well partly educated. They came from, to the best of my knowledge, Odana, Wisconsin, from that area. And he fought this boundary water deal there for years and years. He had a trading post in the store and hauled people over Prairie Portage. I guess you've been over there, eh?
Yeah.
I Sansa said I'd be disappointed if I saw what's going on down there now. But you can't stop progress, whether it's good or bad. Oh, he had a trading post there for a long time. And he tried to write books. I don't know whether any of them was ever published or not. But
Did he buy furs?
yeah, he did. Yes, and way back in the early days before my time, he commercial fished. Basswood Lake, Knife Lake, Saginaw, and everything else.
Where did he ship the fish?
At one time he sold them to the Booth Fisheries. That's a chain outfit in the U.S. Then he wasn't satisfied with that deal. He started a fish plant of his own and went in there, and I guess in those days they used ammonia and stuff, and they didn't quite understand how to put the setup, build it, and this and that. And I guess he lost everything he had. He lost all these fish and everything else. It was spoiled on him, you know what I mean? In the summer. It was all summer fishing. Oh yeah, they fished those lakes from LaCroix right through to Sag. Commercial. Yeah.
Did they take a lot of fish?
I'm sure they did. They did. They had to. Yeah. He had a bunch of Indians. Of course, not only him, but there was many other commercial fishermen besides him too. You know. And then in the summer, see, there was no ice. They didn't have any ice or anything. They used to salt the fish in the summer and put them in barrels, and a lot of it where it was too far to bring. They brought them down Knife Lake through Knife River into Basswood, and from Basswood in over the 4 Mile Portage into Fall Lake, and then on to Winton. That's a long ways to freight fish in the summertime. A lot of them spoil on them too. That's before my time, but I do know.
There wouldn't have been sturgeon in that area.
No, I don't think so. There was sturgeon though at Macquarie. You know where Macquarie Lake is? Up that way, there's sturgeon up there. But there is sturgeon from the Moline River right up into Sturgeon Lake and through that way, and Russell Lake and through there. There's sturgeon in there, we know that.
But not in Conippi?
I don't know. I don't think so. Not to my knowledge.
Yep, that's good.
Scared of Leo's wife was Annie Dufault.
Yes, right. That is right. I knew her.
That's Leonore's mother.
Yes, right.
And
Yeah. Her father was a French. I never knew him. He was dead. But he was another Blackstone as far as power. I saw pictures of him, a giant of a man. Yeah.
did he live over on Saginaw, this Dufault?
Mostly, to the best of my knowledge, I think mostly Basswood Lake, maybe on LaCroix some. See, he was a trapper too, and packer probably for the Hudson Bay, and worked like that, you know. Well, he must have, according to his picture, the man probably weighed 240 or 50 pounds bone and muscle. A great big French breed, that's what he was.
And he was French and Indian.
Indian, that's right.
You don't know whether he was born in the area?
No, I wouldn't. Maybe Bill Hanson or somebody like that might know.
That would be Leonore's grandfather.
Yes, right. You're right.
Was he a chief?
Not to my knowledge, no. Not to my knowledge.
Did you ever hear of Vincent Roy?
Vincent Roy, no.
I had this from a long ago source that he arrived at Fond du Lac, which is Duluth area, about 1799. That's a long time ago, 200.
Yeah.
And one of his descendants was Vincent Dufault, which might be.
It's
his
possible.
man.
That's right. That's right.
And he raised his family on basswood and became an expert woodsman. And he died on basswood and was buried near an early day Indian ceremonial ground on Washington Island.
I know there's Indians buried there, but I couldn't tell you. But this niece or whatever, she might know. She, her mother, Annie Defoe or Annie Chosa, probably, she's gone too. She would have known. I know he died from cancer anyway. But this old Ted Deadbarn and Hearn knew Defoe real well, and Bill Hanson knew him. Bill probably could give you a lot of information regarding Defoe.
When you would be over on Lac LaCroix and then travel over to Saginaw, you find that the people in one area know a whole lot of people there, but they often don't know the people at Saginaw.
That is right. That's right. Because, see, in the early days, there was nothing but canoes, and a lot of them didn't travel too far, In the summertime, some of the Indians in the summer, when we're park ranging, you see them paddling through, going to Sag or vice versa. But
they'd have relatives?
Yes, yeah, that is right. You see, these Pauls over here, their grandmother was Otter Tail from Lake LaCroix, yeah.
Tempest says she wishes that she had listened to her grandmother tell stories.
Yes.
Because they did tell stories in those days.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Not so much now.
No, it's forgotten, you know what I mean?
Leo had 3 brothers, Henry,
Frank,
and Frank.
I knew those two, and Leo was three, but the other one, no.
No, that was right. Henry was on the 4 Mile Portage.
Yes, and he was state game warden too at times. Henry was.
And Frank?
Frank was a storekeeper at Winton. He had a grocery store in the early days. He tried everything too. He commercial fished, he trapped, he did everything.
What kind of things would Leo sell at his store?
Oh, mostly up on Prairie Portage there, mostly pop and beer. That was a big business. And then he had a toll. He used to haul people across the Portage there. He had a good business there. He made some money there.
It was busy there in the summer?
Oh yeah, it got after I left Basswood, it got busier, but he was doing all right. Lived kind of Indian style, though. You know what I mean. He had a few tourist cabins, but they were kind of Indian shacks. But he had people in them, and different things.
Was he a good bushman?
Oh, terrific! And he was partly educated, He had a sawmill,
Did you know George Delahaye?
Real well. He was district forester in Fort and a very fine man. He came from an extremely wealthy family from Eastern Ontario, that fellow. Delahaye was a square shooter.
Did he make a difference when he came as far as Jameson's dealings with the Rangers?
Davison, before him. Davison was the man that got things really, really humming.
With Jameson?
He put Jameson, he put Darby, he put everybody in their place. He had lots of... he was sent up here from Toronto to change things around, and he changed them. But he was fair. In the early days, there was a lot of class with the forestry, with the department. If you had a strike, the guy that did the work, he was nobody, eh? But Davison changed that all around. And he got cabins, these steel towers for the firefighters. He got good cabins built for them, but you had to keep those cabins clean. And if you did a good job, he'd admire you, and if you did a bad job, you wouldn't be there long. And he was every place. He told Jameson that the cabins and stuff in the Quetico Park was a disgrace to the Dominion of Canada. When they were making bunks out of old telephone wire and something awful.
But that was because Jameson didn't give them any money.
At that time Jameson was getting $30,000 a year, which was a lot of money that time to run the park, and he cut her down. He was running her for $17,500. He ruined the park. You know what I mean? As far as he wasn't doing anything to help it. He thought he was saving money for the government. He wasn't saving anything.
Bob Halliday told me how the old logging camp along the, I'm not sure if it was the Moline or up March Creek way, the roof broke one year, and the Rangers got mattresses from there.
Yes.
That up until then they've been sleeping on ropes or...
That's right, or an old deerskin or whatever you...
Or boughs.
Yeah, and we've had each set of Rangers has 4 or 5 cabins. He'd give you 5 gallons of kerosene for a whole winter for all the cabins. You know what I mean? And so many candles, and he'd give you 12. We had them old 38 pistols, or revolvers, whatever you want to call them. He'd give you each Ranger 12 shells. That was your limit. We used to buy our own shells. You know what I mean? Many things.
But finally, someone came that, and it was Davidson.
Davidson Stewart was a good man, but he was only here a year and he got killed. But Davidson was here for 4 years, and he put Rainy River District on the map.
What was his first name?
I can't answer that. Oh. That goes back. But anyway, he resigned. Yeah, he originally came from Cape Breton. He was a Cape Breton Scotchman, and a good fellow too. He came from a very wealthy lumbering family from Nova Scotia, and he didn't pull any punches. He resigned and he went out to McLeod, California, to the best of my knowledge, and he became general manager for Weyerhaeuser Lumber Company, for maybe 2 or 3 times the money. You know, well, he was sharp, but a good guy. Davison's all right, and Delahaye was okay. Delahaye was a little bit too easy. You know, he let them. He didn't. I think that job was a hobby for him.
He was also from a wealthy family.
Extremely wealthy.
In Ontario?
Yes, pardon me, around that Pembroke area. His parents, I knew a park ranger by the name of Davison that came from that part of the country too. Davison is dead. Another Davison came from down that same part. They had an extremely big farm in that area, plus that was only part of their business. They had a big foundry, made stoves and all kinds of things. Davison or Delahaye was not a graduate forester. He wasn't, but he was a pilot and he flew his own airplane. But he was all right.
He sort of kept Jameson in line.
Yes, not as much as Davison though did. See, when Davison came, Jameson was on his way out a little bit.
And Lloyd Ron then replaced him.
Yes, that is right. That's right.
And what happened then to Jameson?
Mr. Jameson went and he had a lot of money that he saved. He didn't spend any. And he went...
He wasn't a Scot, was he?
Oh, yeah, he was a Scotchman. I know a lot of fine Scotchmen. Some of the finest people I know are Scotch descent. He was 6 months old when he came from Scotland, but that has no bearing on it. So he put up an awful howl, you know, when he was let out. They give him a month's wages in advance. And, you know, he was on the superannuation, he was on this, and he was a high mason, but that didn't help him either, because the masons fired him, I know that. That had no bearing on it. He went and he bought a big resort up on Lake of the Woods. And that was a failure. He lost that, and he lost all his money. And the last time I saw Mr. Jameson alive, he was scaling for the Matthew Lumber Company. And then,
which was what he had been doing in the beginning before he started.
Yes. See, he was a government check scaler at one time, and then Matthew gave him the job as the superintendent of the Quetico. Matthew thought by getting rid of him, scaling, he wouldn't check the logs too tight, close, you know. So Matthew got him the job, and Matthew was kind of disappointed afterwards because Jameson, you know. Was around a little bit once in a while. So he lost everything. He lost his, and then he was scaling, was a contractor for Matthew cutting logs in someplace, I just forget now where, and Jameson was out on a Sunday afternoon scaling a skidway of logs which was cut and decked in the woods, and he had a duck coat on, and he was over, in those days you had a number each log. When you scale, you put a number on it, so the check scaler would come, and he could check you on that. He could take that number, put it in his book, and come back, and he could check on you and see if you're scaling it right or wrong. But Jameson had a duck coat on. He was stooped over this way at the end of the skidway, and the contractor that he was working for was looking for a deer, and he wasn't supposed to be. And he came over a hill, and there was this object down there, and he thought it was a deer. And he, with a 30-06, he pinned him right between the shoulder blades, killed him stone dead.
This was the foreman.
The foreman did it, yeah.
What was his name?
I don't know, some Scandinavian, some Swede, I don't know.
He was foreman for Matthew.
Yeah, contractor.
Where did it happen?
It was outside of the Quetico. I think it was on Rainy Lake someplace.
In other words, Matthew got Jameson the job.
Yes.
But then actually, Jameson wasn't all that. I mean, he actually did the job too well for Matthew.
He'd visit the lumber camps once in a while, you know, and yeah. No, Matthew didn't like that. He found out his mistake afterwards.
As a scaler, was he quite honest?
Apparently, I guess he was, to the best of my knowledge.
Were you ever at the lumber camp there out of Quetico into Beaver House?
Yeah, the camp wasn't operating, that was long before my time, but there was a park ranger camp, and I stayed there.
Oh, did you?
I've been up through Quetico Lake, Jean Lake, I've been all through that country there. They took hundreds of millions of feet of lumber out of that area, too.
Were there eagles, lots of eagles in those days?
Yeah, some. That is right. There were some eagles. Not too many.
Not too many.
No, there's quite a few on this lake, though.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly how many, but there's quite a few of them. And they stay here all winter. You know, a lot of people say they go south.
But you actually have seen them. Did you see them in the Quetico in the winter time?
Yeah, some. Yes, around Basswood Lake, and around Kniffy before it burnt there, you know.
Art Madsen says they sometimes get at the traps.
They're desperate killers. They're protected by law, which is, I have no argument on, but they kill everything. They kill fox once in a while, and we know that. They kill otter.
Rabbits.
They're killers.
They'd be hungry in the winter, so they'd have to take what they could get.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I think there's to the best of my knowledge, there's about a half a dozen of them around here in this part of the area. They claim they have about, according to these bird books that I read, they have about a 40-mile range. That they,
Except they seem to concentrate in the Quetico sometimes a bit closer than that. Some nests are closer.
Yes.
Whether it's the young of the one nest. But they're quite an attraction for tourists now.
Yeah.
They seem to steal fish from the osprey, which
that
really
is right.
can
that's right.
hunt. But the eagle, I've never seen an eagle actually take a fish except if it was
Floating or something.
Yeah, really close to the
Yeah, me
surface.
too. Down here at a place called Grassy Narrows, and have you been through there yet? Well, there's been a nest there for about 9 years. Some years there's 2, some years there's 1, some years there's none. But the crows are a deadly enemy to an eagle's nest. The crows steal the eggs on them, and then they claim them by them spraying once in a while. It causes them too. I don't know whether that's right or wrong.
But the nest has been active at
Oh
Grassy?
yes, oh yeah. And there's about 3 nests on this lake that I know of.
Each nest wouldn't be used every year.
Oh,
They sort of move around.
No, pardon me. This nest at Grassy Narrows is used every year. They're there the year round. I saw them around there in the winter too.
Is there open water there every year?
Yeah, some. Not.
I have it written down here from Bob Halliday, I guess, that George Delahaye looked just like Mackenzie King.
Very much so. Very much so. Just a half. Give the lady some use.
No, I'm fine. Now, Bill Darby,
That's fine. Pardon me.
I've been told, was a very tall man
About 6'2" or 3.
and had very small feet.
Yes, a giant of a man though, and not fat, a big raw bone man. And he could drink a barrel of whiskey and it'd never budge on him.
He had Jack Munn. He had Jack Munn as a partner. At one time.
Yes, I knew Jack. He was about 6'4" and like a beanpole. Funny looking, but a nice man. Boy, talk about service. Wait till you come to down on the Hilton someday when I'm down there. Thanks. Go ahead, man.
Was
I'm sorry.
was this on fires that Jack Munn
Yes,
was with him?
that is right. That's right.
What a pair they must have been.
Yeah. Well, pardon me. Darby didn't do much fire patrolling. He was a park ranger, and then he got this job as fire chief for Rainy River District for Lands and Forest at that time. Darby didn't do much fire patrol work. He was mostly a park ranger, and then through some help he got that job as fire chief for the whole Rainy River district.
So that actually it was only when he was the park ranger, before he became the fire chief, that he was in the Quetico.
Yes, that is right, to the best of my knowledge.
But
That's right.
he did help to build a lot of the first cabins.
Yes, yeah, in different places. Yes, right. That's right.
What did you ever hear about, like Robert Reedman would have been before that, before Bill Darby?
Bob Reedman was a fire ranger, or park ranger in the Quetico. But I don't, to the best of my knowledge, not for too long though.
No.
No.
But he was apparently in before 1909.
Well, pardon me, you people should know, wasn't the park formed 1909 or 1910 in that area?
But
I don't know what he would be doing.
I think fire.
Or it
Range.
could be. It's quite possible. Yeah.
Was Bill Darby, did you know whether Bill Darby was ever stationed at French Lake?
Not to my knowledge. He was on Basswood for many, many years as a park ranger. Thank you.
I was told that Bill Darby knew the Indian people at Lac La Croix very well.
Well, he would through Basswood Lake. I'm sure he would, because I'm sure he patrolled at times down. They used to go down Basswood River and come around, and old Mr. Detbarn and Hearn and them fellows. They used to take some long canoe paddles before the tourists started coming very much. Yeah.
He apparently was trying to hire some of the Indians to work on the fires.
Oh yeah. At times that was the only help you could get. In those days there was no fire pumps either. It was just a canvas water pail and a shovel. You know what I mean? And an axe.
How could they ever put them out?
Not very many. The most of them went on the fires went. If they went out on their own, unless they caught it real quick or something. And nothing but paddles. You couldn't get to a fire very quick.
And then you'd have to take your food as well.
That's right. That's right.
Sometimes it was quite inaccessible.
That's for sure.
Did you know Oscar Fredrickson?
Real well. Originally came from Finland. He was he worked for the fire department for Bill Darby for many, many years as a wire chief. They had a telephone line from French Lake one time right to Prairie Portage, and Oscar used to maintain that line. When the line was strung through the woods, trees falling down all the time. He was a great guy, Oscar. Quite a character.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Do you know any stories about him?
Well, pardon me, I knew Oscar very well. At one time he was a trapper at Abbywin. You know where Abbywin is?
Yeah.
And he had property there, Sandy Johnson. I don't know whether that name registers or
I
not.
know Sandy, or knew Sandy.
Yeah. Well, he sold his place. Oscar got old and very sick and had to go to the old people's home apparently in Fort Francis, so he sold out to Johnson. But he lived at Abbywin long before my time and trapped. And then he used to work in the summer for Darby, and then he got on park ranging, and then in the summer he would switch from park ranging to fire watching the telephone lines for them. But they.
Where was his main area to be in the Quetico?
Well, pardon me.
Bailey Bay?
He was stationed at Bailey Bay for a while, for quite a few summers as a fire ranger. They had a fire ranger station there going into Burke Lake. I guess you know where that is.
Mm-hmm.
He was stationed down there for many seasons. Bob Hayes knew him real well.
That's right. Yeah. Apparently, they were trying to move Bob, and Oscar wouldn't let him go because he knew that Bob was courting Theodore.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I remember her when she's only that high.
They're awfully nice people. I stayed at their place when
Wonderful.
I went to Winton.
Real nice.
Yeah.
That was a great lumbering town at one time.
Oscar had a little dog, apparently, that loved to go in the airplane. Was he a big man?
Short and stout, stocky built man, and a great skier. I give these people credit Matty Cogan that skied Ely. I'll tell you, Oscar Fredrickson, and he was Finnish descent from Finland. And there was another famous ranger, John Henriksson, an old country Swede. I'll tell you the truth, I think those two guys would cross that Quetico Park in 2 days. They were terrific skiers, you know. They never made the Hall of Fame and any, you know, but those guys could ski. They were rugged men, and they were, I guess they must have been born in skis, you follow me?
Was Oscar in the Quetico in the wintertime?
Oh yes, as a park ranger. Oh yeah, I never ranged with him.
No.
Let
On
me-
Bailey Bay in the wintertime?
No, he was, pardon me, he was stationed, no, let me get this straight. He was stationed, him and Elmer Moline was stationed on Sturgeon Lake. Oh yeah, he park ranged too, Oscar did.
And he would ski in the wintertime?
Oh yes, ski, you know, something terrific. Those guys are rugged men.
Was there ever sort of a debate as to which was better, skis or snowshoes?
Oh, well, I'll tell you. Oscar had snowshoes, Henriksen had snowshoes. But if they were going to make a long hop someplace, and if there was no slush, they'd take the skis, and they'd cover a long range in a short time.
Did you use snowshoes?
Yes, quite a bit. No, not skis, though. I never was accustomed or...
Well,
Or
you traveled through the bush as well as on the lake.
Yeah, I think I've been into just about every lake in the Quetico Park in
On
my day.
snowshoes.
Yes, or canoe.
Were you ever into Cushing Lake out of McDougall? I went in there in the spring, and Bob Halliday told me McDougall was one of his favorite lakes.
Yeah, there's lots of trout in River Lake.
That's what he said, and
Yeah.
quite a clear lake.
Mm-hmm.
So we just went across, we found a trail, there
Oh,
was
yes.
a blowdown at the top.
Uh-huh.
Into this. It looked like a very pretty lake, but
Mhm.
then there wouldn't be anywhere to go after
No.
you went in.
No.
I don't know. There's no one by the name of Cushing that you know that ranged.
No.